We're in this beautiful town of Lerici, and we've had a fantastic weekend of poetry, of music, of reflections about the life and work of Percy Shelley. And it has been a joyous experience and quite an emotional one as well.
It's an incredible thrill to be here in Lerici, where Shelley spent the last months of his life and where he wrote his final unfinished masterpiece, The Triumph of Life. It's particularly special to be here in the company of so many lovers of Shelley and some amazing contemporary poets, to hear their work in dialogue with Shelley. And we really reflect about how we are here to mark the bicentenary of Shelley's death, but 200 years later his work is incredibly alive and continues to inspire students and scholars and poets even now.
I mean, we know that he wrote poetry here. We know that he wrote his last works here. He wrote lines about Lerici. I think all the Romantic poets, either by being here or by imagining this sort of landscape, wrote about the light, the clarity, the great vivacity, if you like, of the place. And also the Shelleys sought this out. They didn't come from here. They wanted to be here, so there was something that they were seeking here that they may have found, they may not have found. That I don't know.
I mean, the legacy of those poets that I sometimes think of and describe as the Sex Pistols of their day, you know, those romantics, Byron and Keats and Shelley, is that they didn't live into grand old age. It's hard to know. I mean, Wordsworth, to some extent, is the great example of somebody from that era who matured and developed into different sensibilities and found a different style of writing. It's almost impossible to think of an older Shelley. The work is so youthful, so exuberant, so passionate. You can't think of him as somebody who decided to put his slippers on and his smoking jacket and wander gracefully into old age.
I think he was obviously, the way he lived his life was very rebellious, but he was a man that created his own rules and terms and had a very specific philosophy. And I think a lot of people are doing that today, creating their own lives and just trying to carve out a space and be true to themselves. And his work has just been so influential and is obviously so beautiful and powerful that it's always going to be relevant, I think.
I suspect that the configurations of atoms in his brain was really what made Shelley. I just think he was an oddball, you know, a genuine one-off. They broke the mold when they made Shelley. I mean, he was bullied a great deal as a child, but seemed to keep standing back up. And he was eccentric. And I think the eccentricity won through in the end. You know, he had a great number of admirers. A person that in the end you wanted to believe and do well for himself.
I think poetry is having a renaissance, and I think it's more popular than ever. And I think coming out of the pandemic, we all appreciate and perhaps agree that the arts, poetry, music, it's not superfluous, it's a necessity. And really, poetry and music, it's the things that got me through the pandemic, and nature, it's important for day-to-day life. And I think more than ever, people want to experience poetry and hear poetry being read.
It's exciting to be here and to share all these emotions with friends from the UK and from Italy, and to be this evening in this fantastic venue that is the Castello di Lerici for this musical recital. And it's an amazing event, and I'm grateful to all the people who have organized this fantastic celebration.
There has been so much to take in, but I think for me, my favourite moment was sitting in a garden just outside the Casa Magni, which was Shelley's last dwelling. And this was the house where his wife miscarried, where his friend Claire lost her daughter, where Shelley himself saw his double on the balcony like a portent of his own death. And as we know, he lost his life here in these seas not very long afterwards. And for me, and I think for everybody who was there, that was such a poignant and emotional moment. And looking at the house where all this had happened, it made me feel very close to him.
This festival has been extraordinary. In a way, you take a step back from something which so many people have contributed to in their own very particular way. And so you couldn't have anticipated how it would affect you. From the wonderful view up to the castle, you know, from seeing photographs of the Casa Magni before, when Shelley was living in it, when it was practically falling into the sea anyway. I mean, it's no wonder it feels like a shipwreck before you've even started. And poets have an extraordinary effect, I find, on reminding you of the other layers to life that exist. Always slightly under the surface, but here they all come to the top and they're riding the waves. And here 4 such wonderful poets reading their work, very different, but all of them superb poets, has been very moving, very touching and very haunting. And to sit in the park next to the Casa Magni and hear them reading was a highlight for me.